Violence and abuse and drugs and alcohol has been part of my life. A lot of my childhood, I can't remember a lot of good times, was about surviving. For the street kids was quite prominent back then, and we had different street gangs. I developed an anger that turned into criminal activities. I found God when I nearly wanted to. I attempted to end my life. It wasn't easy to say I've had enough.
Young soldier of God, steady march.
Ki te taho tōku pāpā, he uri tēnei no tauranga moana, no nai te rangi, no Ngāti Pukenga. Ko Matilda Kahotea tōku pāpā, ki taho tōku māma uri hoki tēnei, no Tūhoi, no Ngāti Parau, no Ngāti Kahununu ki Wairua. Ko Bernadette Grant Lambert tōku māma. Nari no wano ki konei ki te raki pai whenua mohi ana tātou ko te North Shore. I live here on the North Shore in Auckland, and my name's Matilda Kahotea. Our kaupapa here is called Nga Kete Wananga Solutions, and I suppose it stemmed from about 8-9 years ago, from a bunch of mothers that lived in Beach Haven, and sisters and husbands and wives. We were all part of a tight unit, a family, I suppose, a whānau, and we had sons that are gang members, we had husbands that are gang members, brothers that are gang members, and a lot of our whānau at that time were going through the system, the justice system, and a few of our whānau members, including myself, we had experienced loss of our sons, of our brothers, of our fathers, and through death. And from, I suppose, all those trials and tribulations in our lives, we identified that we wanted to make a difference, a positive difference, starting off with our families, and then maybe in the wider community we could help in that space too. So yeah, it started from there. It started from kōrero kouta. We started talking in the kitchen, to having monthly meetings, monthly hui with each other, to see what we wanted to do, what would that look like, how that would come about. What we try to draw off our experiences of what we already knew, our lived experiences, how we could implement that into making a difference in a healing space for our whānau. And we were focusing on our gang member whānaus because that was our space, that's what we lived in. But we identified, I suppose, there wasn't much help out there, and also that people weren't wanting to help them much. After that it got a bit bigger, and then we started doing workshops with our communities. So we went out there, we started doing huis with our gang member whānaus, and we started doing it with our community, our community out there as well, to see what they wanted to see within our workspace that we were creating, or our healing space we wanted to create to help our whānau. Yeah, I think as far as I can remember, violence and abuse and drugs and alcohol has been part of my life. I've known it, and I know since as far as I can remember, like I said, since I was 3 or 4 years old, till my adulthood. I grew up, I was born in Gisborne. My mum separated from my biological father when I was very young, so I don't remember much about him. And then she met my stepfather. My childhood wasn't great with him. He was really physically abusive. I suppose that being a 20-something and being that young and taking on other kids was a big burden for him, but we definitely felt it. We didn't feel love. He was a very violent man, not just to us, but he had a tendency to be violent with animals as well. I remember when I was about 3, I remember him lining us up and killing cats in front of us and that kind of stuff. I suppose just to enforce his authority over us and scare us, and it worked. And then, of course, the abuse and the beatings and the hiding started on us. When I said us, there were about 10 of us, 10 kids. A lot of my brothers and sisters were whāngai out to their grandparents. But I grew up with Mum. It went from being physical when I was little, and then when I was about, I think, turned about 7 or 8, my uncles started to sexually abuse me. So that went on till I left home. I was about 12. So yeah, a lot of my childhood, I can't remember a lot of good times, was about surviving pretty much the next day. And I learnt a lot of survival skills through that experience. I developed, living skills of my own, even that young, of how to cope with what I was coping with. From there, I took off from home. I'd end up on the streets. I was with the street kids was quite prominent back then, and we had different street gangs. So I grew up on the streets for a couple of years, and then I met another lot of family, younger ones like me. It was about sniffing back then, so we were all sniffers on glue and spray paint, and that was pretty much the time I started experimenting with drugs and alcohol. It was about time I was 11 or 12 when I started taking off from home. I took off from home and I met up with another group, and I stayed just on the edges of Auckland. And while staying with them, I was 12. I was gang raped by 4 men. And fortunate enough for me, I had a family out there that helped me, and they rang my sister to come and collect me, and she did. So around this time, I had this real, I began to have this real disheartening or a real hatred for men. I think I started developing a real hatred for men around that time, which made me, I suppose, I became real staunch in everything I did. I developed an anger that turned into criminal activities, I suppose, and I drowned a lot of it in drugs, and I got a lot involved in that arena as well, around gang members, around drug dealing. That's how I survived. I started to deal with marijuana pretty young, when I was 13, and I got quite good at it actually. And I developed my own group, and I got them selling for me. About that time, I met up with my first husband, my first partner. So I was about 14 when I met him. And he was within the drug realm too. And so, yeah, we ended up meeting each other, and we got together, and we had our first child when I was 16, my son. And I kind of started cleaning myself up a bit. I mean, at that time, he was the first man I ever met that never run me down, that never hit me. I actually was the one that was the abuser in that relationship. I was the one that used to hit him every time I lashed out. And this wasn't a small man. He was a well-respected man on the shore. He was probably one of the biggest drug dealers on the North Shore at that time. And a lot of people feared him. But what a lot of people didn't know about him was the loving side, and we always saw that. He loved his kids, he loved me. But like I said, I was the one offloading at that time. I had a lot of demons, and he copped a lot of that, and he copped it well. So I was a very different person back then, still bitter, full of hate. But he got me through that. So we ended up at that time, we were still drug dealing. That's how we made our money, of different types of drugs. And I was having kids at that time. I ended up with 4 boys. By the time I was 21, I had my 2 older boys and a set of twin boys. And they were our life. We pretty much focused a lot around them. But we had a lot of free time on the weekends, so we'd party on the weekends as well, because free time we gave our kids over to his mum, his grandmother. She was godsend. And she'd have them every weekend without fail. So that was our party time. So we still had our time where we were still dealing and doing drugs ourselves on the weekends. I think we tried to justify it then because we'd never do it when they were home, but it was still there. So he developed a big, I suppose, persona around himself on the shore, well known around drug dealing. Himself, he could play in all sorts of worlds. He was really sociable. He got asked to join different gangs, but he always told them, no, my gang's at home, that's my son's. That's my tribe back at home. So, and he was respected for that. And then something happened when I was about, when we were 22, my husband was killed in a car accident. And it was my first time I really had experienced loss like that. And I didn't cope with it too well. I ended up actually, after he died, I ended up drowning my sorrows again in alcohol and any drugs I could get my hands on. And it was abundant. It was around at that time when my husband passed, I took over his business. I was the big one then, and I took it on wholeheartedly because I didn't want to take on the loss of him. And it took me down a real bad pathway. I lost our house, I lost my kids. My kids ended up living with their grandmother, and she raised them for the majority till she died, actually. I was there. I think most of that time I'd be in and out of their lives, and I'd try and buy their love. They had everything they wanted. If I, with the money I was making, they were the first ones to get phones, cellular phones when they came out, that kind of stuff. I thought there was enough. I thought there'd be enough for them, but I learnt much later on there wasn't near enough, and I learnt a harsh lesson with my boys. They taught me. After a while, I dealt drugs for a while, and then I found God when I nearly wanted to. I attempted to end my life. Because no matter how much money and much drugs and so-called friends I had around, I was still kind of dying inside. It wasn't enough. It wasn't fulfilling. It wasn't what I wanted. So I remember being at the beach, Takapuna Beach actually one time, and just walking into the water. A couple came in, rescued me that night. But all for good reason, I found out. But during that experience, I really realised that I was actually where I thought I was alone. I never was, really. There was always someone looking over me. And then I started to put things together. From that time, from when I was younger, I remember always thinking to I felt the times where I felt where I was getting beaten or something, that I also felt warm, that there was something there looking over me and protecting me. And I couldn't identify what that was at the time. And even through my husband's death, I could feel this veil of somebody there. Although I knew I was in so much pain, there was still something on the outside there looking over me, and I felt protected at those times. And then I realised who that was and what that was after the experience I had of trying to commit suicide. So that time I found God. And He started entering in my life with different signs and signals that came along. The church started coming to my door. Different churches. I kind of experimented in a lot of places where I felt comfortable, and some just didn't feel comfortable with me, but I knew God was there. It was just a matter where I felt comfortable, where He was. Anyway, that's the journey I started taking. From there, I met my second partner. And I was pretty much, I'd gone through my own kind of rehabilitation. My rehabilitation I found in God, and I found in learning around who I was. So I went to join classes in Te Reo Māori. I went with a few friends, and from there I started to learn who I was. And from there, my heart it became full. My kete, that fullness I wanted to feel, was starting to take place in me. And I began to now believe I wasn't that person down there. Learning about who I was and who the people that made me were before me, my tupuna, and learning around who they were, that sense of pride and mana gave me an identity, because that identity I was carrying around beforehand was an identity that was labelled upon me when I was at court, when I was brought up in social welfare for a long time, till I was 18. But we were social welfare kids back then, or we were deemed as criminals. We were deemed criminal Māori back then. So learning that gave me a better understanding around who I was, and it taught me that I wasn't that label that society had given me. I wasn't that criminal, I wasn't that hero, I wasn't that, everything bad. I had a past that I could be proud of, and who I was. What got me to, and then I started from there I started teaching. I didn't want to teach actually, but when you were learning Te Reo Māori back then, there was few and far places to learn. So the next phase after learning the first year, I had to find another arena, and it led me to Te Wānanga o Takura. And from there, I learned, I had to, if I wanted to be fully immersed, I took my bachelor's of teaching kura kaupapa Māori. When you've gone from not having an education for so long and then going into that realm, it was so daunting. You're so intimidated because there's people there that, of course, are in that on the other side of the fence. They didn't know much about me, but it was a really daunting space to be in. I found it really challenging, but it was I found it exciting at the same time. That was me. I loved being challenged. So, but it took me out of my realm of being not knowing, just knowing that world, to coming into this world and beginning to understand another world that was away from drugs and violence and all that kind of stuff. The violence was still happening, even through my bachelor's degree. So my second relationship was domestic violence, and it was pretty bad. I hid it well. you know, it's not something you'd like to share out there, especially in the world I was starting to delve in, where their lives were obviously pretty different, and this was happening at home. So it was a lot of the struggle, was fighting that the violence that was happening and trying to better myself at the same time. But I got through it. I actually stayed in that relationship for a very long time, because although I was still trying to make myself better, I still didn't know how to live outside that world, because that was normal for us. It was normal for me. I normalized it, because that's all I knew. I got beaten since I was little, so I was used to it. It got that bad. It became a habit I was used to. So it was unusual not to have it. The short time I didn't have it in my life was when my first partner, again, I was the abuser, so I dished it out. And then I thought to myself later, when I met my second husband, maybe I deserve this. And I fell into that realm, because he was a hardworking man. He also did a lot of drugs as well. But yeah, it was something I was used to as a habit, and it was normality for me to be beaten, and I didn't think anything otherwise of it. So yeah, I stayed in that relationship for a long time, and unfortunately, my kids saw it as well, and a lot of resentment. I got a lot of resentment, which was fair enough, from my kids growing up. As much as I thought I was trying to do my best for them, them being part of that as well, the thing that I had normalized, was probably the worst thing I could ever have done to them. To witness that much violence around them and to their mother. They, being kids, they just learned to cope with it as well. And then I decided to break that cycle. So my healing took a while. It took a while. And it wasn't easy. It's not even easy trying to better your life and say the buck stops with me, because you've had it was a generational thing. My mum and dad were beaten. That no doubt their parents were beaten before them. It got brought onto me. So when you're actually saying something like that, you're not stopping it just in your life. It was something you're stopping that happened generations and generations until it got to your life. So that was a pretty big massive move. My kids, so I have 3 of my boys are gang members with the headhunters, and I suppose my disassociation with them through their life, and like I said, some well-deserved resentment came my way from them because I wasn't in their lives, and I started to feel it. I started to feel the pain of not being mum, and rightly so. They made me feel it, and I needed to feel it. I needed to own everything I had done to be able to move into that space of healing. And I needed to listen to them. I needed to listen to my kids, because I never did. I never truly listened to how they felt through their upbringing, what they used to see me do, what they see me go through. So what made me change is that I sat down and I listened to them and their story. I needed to hear their story in their life and the changes and the fights they had to go through to be part of their lives again, because I wanted to be part of their lives again, and I wasn't. And I so desperately wanted to be that, but I had to earn that right back. And like I said, rightly so. I wasn't there at the start. And I'm pretty much still doing that, but we're in a good space that I really enjoy now with my kids. What made me get into this realm, though, of helping our whānau as well, is that one of my sons did a big lag. And what made me wake up and see something that I didn't find was right was that when the judge actually looked at my son, he said, you typically fit the three points that led you to where you are here today. And he said those three things is that you're a gang member, you're unemployed, and you're Māori. And I looked at him and I thought, what? Is that what they think Māori is? That he can dictate that that's what Māori is in a public arena. He's saying that's what Māori is. And that woke me up, and I was going, that's, I'm sick of hearing that. I was sick of hearing it because that's not who we are. They don't get to put us in that space, in that arena, and say this is what Māori is. This bad entity that they've created. Because I believe after learning who I am, what Māori is, and it isn't that. It isn't what they dictated to be. So I thought to myself back then, no, these people need a better understanding of who we are as a people and what we have to offer to our people in that healing space, because they fully don't understand who we are. And if they're telling our own there, and I listened to that crap since I was brought up, that's who we are. We're down here, we're part of the criminal system, we're part of that, those bad entities that got out in that system. And I wanted to make a change there. And which led me to making this kaupapa, a tikanga Māori-based kaupapa. And I do push that at the forefront, like I said. Our programs here, our tikanga needs to be recognised as a healing entity within these healing spaces. And I can honestly say it still hasn't. But I'm willing to sit here and make sure it bloody well does here. Yeah, we make a difference here. We actually got established in 2021 in Dairy Flat. And we had our first man arrive from Wiri prison on parole. And we kind of just went from there. We started, a lot of what I started implementing here was from what I learnt as a teacher in Kura Kaupapa Māori. So I taught for 15 to 20 odd years. I was in that arena for a long time before I got sick. And then what I've implemented, or what I've taught and what I learnt from there, I brought back into this space. And it worked well. And when I mean what I brought back in here was tikanga Māori. We deliver our tikanga Māori programs, and I always put those programs at the forefront. We do have the other programs, our clinical programs, our CADS programs, and our NA programs, and all our AOD programs. They are implemented here too. But I specifically focus on our tikanga Māori programs because I'm not saying it's any better, but it offers something different alongside these programs to help in our healing space. The reason I push them at the forefront is because I need them to be recognised in this area. Although they're not new to us as a people, our tikanga Māori, it is I've noticed fairly new in this arena and service. So it's taken a bit of time for people to understand how it works and why it works and who it works for. It's been a bit of a fight, actually. But that's okay. We're used to doing that. Come what may, I will still, I will still practice and put our tikanga Māori practices first and foremost here. I always stress that to our people that come here. This is what we're based around. So what we deliver here is our whakapapa program. We do maurako, we do kapahaka, we do te reo Māori. Of course, these all work and run with tikanga Māori. They all have something to offer within this healing space. You've got to be a part of it to fully understand it. Along with the other programs, that's what we deliver here. I think it's looking awesome because I've learned not to rely on everything out there. I think as a people we've learned that within ourselves to fight to get to where we are. We've always had to do that, and so that's what I'm doing. I'm just following that road. If I believe that something is good and is working here, and I've seen the successes here, it's been successful. With people, they were ready just to throw away the key with. Like I said, I've been working with our gang members here, and the changes they've made, they're able to make, like any other, they're human beings. They're able to make changes. They have hearts, they have souls. I don't see the pictures. I see our brothers, I see our fathers, I see our sons, I see our grandfathers. That's who they are. And so that's the way we treat them here as family members, and we get them through their hard times by learning around who they are, the great world they're connected to, and giving them faith back in themselves. So I think from here, we're doing awesome. Like any movement that we've done as a people, it'll go great. That's the faith I have in it. I'm just going to move forward, come what may. We've had some downfalls, experiences, but like anything, you learn from your bad experiences and you go and you keep going. And that's what we're doing here. We're back on top. Our house is full again. The wairu is beautiful. Any advice to give our wahine that's struggling, it's probably to find your special corner of the world and thrive in it and grow from it there. You have a place here. You have a place here, and you have a place that's just as equal as anybody else. I'm just going to throw that as an example. I think it's great that this environment we're in, because this is wahine led, this kaupapa. It's led by wahine. And it's helped in so many arenas, and the way our tāne look at us and the way we look at it, at our tāne at an equal level, because it hasn't always been like that. But it's made a difference here. We are important. We're just as important as anybody else in the upbringing of our people, in leadership roles as well. Don't settle. Don't settle for something you believe that the world says that you have to do. Get out of the kitchen if you want to get out of there, and create your own business and create your own space and be a leader. That's what I encourage our women to do.